My husband told everyone I was losing it postpartum. Then he tried to get emergency custody while I was still bleeding from childbirth. He thought he was building the perfect case. What he didn't know was I was recording the truth. Before we begin, if you enjoy long Reddit-style stories with twists, receipts, and consequences, please hit like, drop your verdict in the comments, and subscribe. We're pushing for our first 1,000 subscribers, and it genuinely helps more than you think. I'm 29 F. My husband, Trent, is 33 M. We have a baby girl, Sophie, who's now 10 months old. This happened right after she was born, during that fragile window where you're exhausted, emotional, and your entire identity is being rebuilt by force. People love saying, postpartum is hard. They don't talk about what happens when someone uses postpartum like a weapon. Trent and I weren't a dramatic couple. We had normal arguments about money, chores, family visits. Nothing that would make you warn a friend, girl, run. If anything, Trent had a reputation for being calm. He was the reasonable one, the guy who always looked steady in front of other people. That's important. Because when a calm person tells everyone you're unstable, people believe him. Sophie's birth wasn't smooth. I had a long labor and then a C-section. I remember the bright lights, the cold, the pressure, the way my body didn't feel like it belonged to me. Sophie came out screaming, and I cried so hard I couldn't breathe. Trent looked emotional for about 2 days. Then reality kicked in. We got home and the sleep deprivation started. Sophie didn't sleep in neat little blocks. She slept in chaos. 2 hours here, 40 minutes there, sometimes nothing. I was healing from surgery, learning breastfeeding, pumping when breastfeeding failed, and trying to keep my head above water. Trent went back to work quickly and started calling himself the provider, like it was a title he'd earned. At first I tried to appreciate what he did. He'd bring me water. He'd take Sophie for 10 minutes so I could pee without panicking. He'd post photos of her and caption them things like "my world" and "girl dad energy," even though she's not a girl dad situation, but whatever. People praised him constantly. What a great father. She's so lucky. But behind the scenes, Trent started narrating my life like I was a problem to manage. If I cried, he'd say, "You're spiraling." If I asked for help, he'd say, "You're becoming dependent." If I got frustrated because he walked past a pile of diapers like it was invisible, he'd say, "I'm worried about your mood swings." Mood swings. That phrase started showing up everywhere. The first real red flag hit around week 3. Trent's mom, Janice, came over unannounced. I was on the couch with Sophie on my chest, trying to keep her asleep. Janice walked in loudly, clapped her hands like we were in a sitcom, and Sophie startled awake and started screaming. I was tired enough to see stars. I said, "Please, can you text before coming over?" She finally fell asleep. Janice's face tightened. "Excuse me." Trent immediately stepped in and smiled at his mom. "She's just exhausted, Mom. Hormones." And I swear, he said hormones like a diagnosis. Janice looked at me like I was embarrassing. Well, I raised 3 kids. A little noise won't hurt her. Sophie screamed harder. My incision throbbed. My milk leaked. I felt my body filling with panic. Trent looked at me and said quietly, "See, this is what I mean. You're getting worked up." Then he turned to his mom and said, loud enough for her to hear clearly, "She's been kinda intense lately." That was the moment I realized something. He wasn't defending me. He was labeling me. After Janice left, I confronted Trent as calmly as I could. "Why would you say that?" Trent sighed like I was exhausting. "Say what?" "That I'm intense, that it's hormones." He shrugged. "It is hormones, you're not yourself." "I am myself," I said. "I'm just tired and healing." Trent smiled in this slow, patronizing way. "You don't have to prove anything. I'm on your side." but it didn't feel like he was on my side. It felt like he was taking notes. A week later, my friend Kara came by with coffee and groceries. Kara is the kind of friend who will show up with supplies and zero judgment. She walked in, saw the messy living room, and immediately said, "Don't apologize. You have a newborn." I wanted to cry out of relief. Trent came home while Kara was there. He acted like the perfect dad, kissed Sophie's head, smiled, asked Kara about her job, charm mode on. Then Kara said, "How are you holding up?" Before I could answer, Trent laughed lightly and said, "Honestly, I'm worried. She's been not stable." Not stable. Kara blinked. What? Trent waved his hand like it was nothing. Postpartum stuff. She's fine most of the time, but sometimes she gets really unpredictable. My stomach dropped so hard it felt like nausea. I looked at Trent like, "Are you serious right now?" Kara glanced at me, confused. "Do you feel unsafe or something?" Trent answered for me. No, she's not unsafe. She's just emotional. We're monitoring it." Monitoring it. That word terrified me. Because who is we? I forced a smile and said, "I'm tired, Kara, that's all." Trent's eyes narrowed a fraction, like he didn't like me correcting the narrative. After Kara left, I said, "Why would you say I'm not stable to my friend?" Trent's tone turned cold. "Because someone needs to take this seriously." I stared at him. "Take what seriously?" Trent sighed and rubbed his forehead like a stressed hero. "Your behavior, you're forgetting things, you're crying constantly, you're snapping. It's not normal." "It is normal," I said. "I'm postpartum." Trent leaned closer and said quietly, "You're not going to like hearing this, but if you keep going like this, someone could get involved." My blood turned to ice. "Someone like who?" I asked. Trent shrugged. "Doctors, family, maybe authorities, if they think the baby isn't safe." I felt my whole body go cold. "Are you threatening me?" Trent blinked like I was insane. "What? No, I'm saying I'm worried." That's how he did it. He'd drop a terrifying implication, then act like you were crazy for noticing. That night I couldn't sleep. Sophie finally went down around 2 a.m., and I sat in the dark scrolling my phone with one hand and holding my incision with the other. I remembered we had a baby monitor app. I opened it. And I don't know why, maybe instinct, but I checked the history on our home security camera. We had a small indoor camera in the living room that we used for packages and to check the dog when we traveled. I hadn't looked at it in months. I scrolled back to earlier that week, the day Trent called me unpredictable. And there it was. Footage of Trent in the living room, holding Sophie, talking on the phone. He didn't know the camera recorded sound. He said, calm and confident, "Yeah, she's getting worse. I'm keeping track. If she flips out, I'll have enough to get emergency custody. I just need it to look like a pattern." Pattern. Emergency custody. Enough. My hand started shaking so badly, I almost dropped my phone. Then he said something that made my stomach drop even further. "I'm not doing this to be cruel. I'm doing it because I can't risk her taking the baby when she finally loses it." I replayed the clip 3 times. He wasn't afraid of me hurting Sophie. He was afraid of losing control. And he was building a case on purpose while I was healing. I did 2 things immediately. First, I screen recorded the footage and uploaded it to a private cloud folder. I sent it to Kara, my sister, and a burner email I created just for this. Second, I didn't confront him. Not yet. Because the worst thing I could do was give him a dramatic reaction he could clip out of context. So I became calm. Not calm because I felt calm, but calm because it was armor. For the next 2 weeks I did gray rock like my life depended on it. Short answers. No arguments. No tears in front of him. I took Sophie to the pediatrician and made sure every appointment was documented. I attended my postpartum checkup and asked for a written note stating I was coherent, engaged, and seeking normal postpartum support. I started texting Trent instead of talking, so everything was in writing. And I kept watching the camera. That's when I realized Trent wasn't just documenting me. He was provoking me. He'd wait until Sophie was screaming and I hadn't slept, then stand in the doorway and say things like, "Are you sure you can handle this?" Or should I call someone? Or my favorite, "Don't do anything you'll regret." He said it like a warning, like he wanted me to snap. One afternoon, Sophie was crying and I was trying to warm a bottle. Trent stood behind me and said loudly, "You're shaking. You're scaring her." I turned around slowly and said evenly, "I'm not shaking. I'm warming milk." Trent smiled, see, defensive. Then he glanced toward the camera. That glance made me want to scream. Because he was performing. Then the next escalation happened. Trent's mom called me. Her voice was sweet, but it wasn't normal sweet. It was "I'm collecting information" sweet. "Hi, sweetheart," she said. "How are you feeling?" "I'm okay," I said. She hummed. "Trent said you've been having a hard time." I paused. "He said that?" "Oh yes," she said. "He's worried about you. He says you've been emotional." Emotional, another label. I said carefully, "I'm postpartum, that's normal." Janice sighed like I was making excuses. "Sweetheart, postpartum depression can be very serious." "I'm being monitored by my doctor," I said. "I'm fine." There was a pause. Then Janice said, "Well, we just want what's best for the baby." That sentence hit like a brick. Because what's best for the baby was now their code for "we're about to intervene." That night Trent came home and said, "My mom thinks you should see someone." "I am seeing my doctor," I replied calmly. Trent tilted his head. "A real therapist, someone who can document how you're doing." Document. There it was again. I stared at him. "Why do you need documentation?" Trent's eyes flicked toward the living room camera, then back to me. "Because I need to know Sophie is safe." I said quietly, "You're not trying to keep Sophie safe. You're trying to build a case." Trent's face went blank. Then he laughed once sharp. "You're paranoid," he said, "and you're proving my point." I felt a cold clarity settle over me. He wanted me to be the unstable one. That's how he wins. So I decided I would win first. The next morning, I called a family law attorney. I told her everything in a calm voice. The postpartum context, the camera footage, the language he used, the pattern comment, the involvement of his mother. The attorney went quiet and then said, "You need to keep your receipts and you need to move carefully. Do you have support?" "Yes," I said, "my sister." "Good," she said. "And I want you to start building your own timeline, because if he's setting you up, the goal is to control the narrative first." Control the narrative first. That became my mission. A few days later, Trent made his move. It happened after a bad night. Sophie had colic and screamed for hours. I slept maybe 40 minutes. My body felt like it was floating outside itself. Trent walked into the kitchen while I was making coffee, looked at my face and said, "You look unwell." "I'm tired," I said. Trent shook his head slowly. "No, this is different." Then he said, "I think we should take Sophie to my mom for a few days." I froze. "What?" Trent's voice stayed calm. "Just so you can rest. You're not thinking clearly." My heart started pounding. "No." Trent's eyes narrowed. "See, you're being irrational. This is what worries me." I said very quietly, "You're not taking my baby." Trent sighed like he was the victim. "I'm trying to help you." I stared at him, and said the most important sentence of my life. "If you take my baby without my consent, I will call the police." Trent's face changed. The mask slipped for a second, anger flashed. Then he smiled again too fast and said, "Okay, okay, calm down." He walked out. And 2 hours later, CPS called me. No exaggeration, no delay, 2 hours. A woman introduced herself and said there was a report about postpartum mental instability and risk to the infant. My entire body went cold, but my voice stayed steady. "Okay," I said, "when are you coming?" We scheduled the visit for the next day. The moment I hung up, I called my attorney. She said, "Good, stay calm, have your records ready, have your home clean, and do not let him provoke you in front of them." I cleaned like my life depended on it, because it did. I laid out Sophie's pediatrician records, my postpartum checkup notes, a list of feedings, diapers, everything. I asked my sister to be present. Trent came home that night acting weirdly sweet. He hugged me and said, "I'm proud of you." I wanted to throw up. The next day, CPS arrived. Trent was in full performance mode. He spoke softly. He held Sophie like a saint. He looked at the social worker with sad eyes and said, "I'm just worried." The social worker asked me questions. I answered calmly. Then she asked Trent what his concerns were. Trent sighed dramatically and said, "She gets overwhelmed and sometimes she says scary things." I looked at him. "What scary things?" Trent hesitated, then said, "She said she's afraid she might hurt Sophie." I felt my blood turn to ice. I said slowly, "That is not true." Trent shrugged like, "See." I turned to the social worker and said, "May I show you something?" Trent's head snapped toward me. "What?" I opened my phone and said calmly, "We have a home camera in the living room. It recorded Trent saying he is building a custody case and needs a pattern to get emergency custody." Trent's face went pale. The social worker's expression changed instantly. I played the clip. Trent's voice filled the room. "If she flips out, I'll have enough to get emergency custody. I just need it to look like a pattern." Silence. Trent tried to speak, but the social worker held up her hand. She looked at Trent and asked, "Did you say this?" Trent stammered, "She's taking it out of context." The social worker said, "There is no context where that sounds like concern." Then she asked me, "Do you feel safe?" I said, "Not with him, not anymore." The social worker asked Trent to step outside for a moment. Trent looked stunned, like the script wasn't going his way. When he left the room, the social worker lowered her voice and said, "I'm going to document this. The report will reflect potential malicious reporting and coercive control." Coercive control. Those words felt like someone finally naming the monster. CPS closed the case as unfounded within a week. But Trent didn't stop. Because Trent wasn't doing this for CPS. He was doing it for court. 2 days after CPS left, Trent filed for emergency custody. He claimed I was unstable. He claimed I was a danger. He claimed I was withholding the baby and refusing support. It was like watching someone write fan fiction about your life and then hand it to a judge. My attorney got the filing and said, "He's moving fast because he thought CPS would validate him." I said, "He won't stop." My attorney replied, "Then we make him regret starting it." We prepared. We pulled my medical records, my postpartum screening, my therapy appointment schedule, because yes, I started therapy as a proactive step, and I wasn't ashamed of it. We pulled the camera footage, the texts where he called me unwell, the messages where his mother said, "We want what's best for the baby," the timeline. Then my attorney said, "We should also look for motive." Motive, I asked. She said men who fabricate these cases usually have a reason. Money, control, an affair, image. That last one stuck. And that's when the biggest twist hit. Kara, my friend, called me one night. Her voice was tight. I didn't want to say this, but I think Trent is cheating. I felt my stomach drop. What? Kara said, my cousin works at Trent's company. She said Trent's been acting like a single guy, talking about how his wife went crazy after the baby, and he's been spending a lot of time with this coworker, Amanda. Amanda. Trent had mentioned an Amanda before. He'd called her a team lead, a friend, someone who understands pressure. I felt my hands go cold. Kara said, and get this, Amanda recently got divorced, and she's been telling people she doesn't want kids, but she loves babies. I sat in silence. Because it clicked. Trent wanted to be free. He wanted to be the victim. He wanted to keep Sophie without paying child support. And he wanted to look like a hero father to everyone, including his new girlfriend. My attorney told me not to investigate directly. But life handed me the proof anyway. 2 days before the emergency hearing, Trent made a mistake. He came home late and left his laptop open. I wasn't looking for drama. I was looking for survival. I saw an email thread on the screen. It was between Trent and Amanda. And the subject line was, "Next steps." My heart started pounding. I read it. Amanda wrote, "If you get temporary custody, your situation is stable enough. My lawyer said it looks better if you're the primary parent. Then she can't take money from you." Then Trent replied, "Exactly. I just need the judge to see her as unstable. I have clips, and my mom will testify." Clips. Testify. Money. I took photos. I sent them to my attorney. I backed them up. Then I closed the laptop and went to the bathroom and threw up. Because it wasn't just betrayal. It was a plan. The emergency hearing happened on a Thursday morning. Trent showed up in a suit, looking calm and sad. Janice sat behind him, clutching tissues like she was a grieving widow. Trent's lawyer tried to paint me as unstable, sleep-deprived, emotional, postpartum concerns. They used every cliché. Then my attorney stood up and said, "We have evidence this is a manufactured narrative." She played the living room footage. Then she submitted the email photos. Then she showed my medical records and therapist letter stating I was not a danger. I was engaged, coherent, and seeking normal support. Then she asked Trent a single question. "Did you call CPS within hours of asking your wife to send the baby to your mother?" Trent hesitated. The judge's eyes narrowed. Answer. Trent said, "I was worried." My attorney replied, he wasn't worried. He was building a case. He said it on video. He put it in writing. He discussed it with another woman. Janice gasped like she'd been shot. Trent's face went gray. The judge looked at Trent and said, "So while your wife was recovering from surgery, you were collecting footage and planning custody strategy?" Trent stammered, "No, Your Honor, I—" The judge cut him off. Emergency custody denied. I almost collapsed from relief. Then the judge issued temporary orders. Sophie stayed with me. Trent got scheduled visitation, structured with strict rules about third-party involvement. And then the judge said something that felt like the universe speaking through her. "The court does not reward parents who weaponize postpartum recovery." After the hearing, Trent tried to corner me in the hallway. He hissed, "You ruined my life." I looked at him and said calmly, "You tried to ruin mine first." And I walked away. The months after were ugly, but different. Because once your abuser loses control of the story, they panic. Trent started posting vague quotes online about men being silenced. His mother told relatives I was unstable. Amanda mysteriously stopped existing, at least publicly. But the truth was now documented. I kept everything in writing. I stopped taking phone calls. I communicated through the parenting app the court recommended. I documented visits. I documented everything. Eventually, Trent's lawyer pushed for mediation. He wanted to move on. Of course he did, because the case wasn't going his way. We finalized custody with strong boundaries. He got visitation. I got primary custody. No more CPS threats. No more surprise wellness checks. No more Janice acting like she owned my baby. And here's the funniest part, in a dark way. Months later, Trent messaged me through the parenting app. Can we be civil? People are starting to ask questions. I replied, we can be civil. We will not be manipulated. He never tried again. Last update, I'm not unstable. I'm not crazy. I was postpartum, healing from surgery and being targeted by someone who wanted control. And Sophie is thriving. She laughs easily, she sleeps better, she claps when music plays, she's safe. She's loved, she's not a pawn. So here's my question for you. If your partner called you unstable postpartum and tried to involve CPS and court, would you have confronted them immediately, or would you have collected receipts like I did? If you made it this far, hit like, drop your verdict in the comments and subscribe. We're still pushing for our first 1,000 subscribers, and I post full Reddit-style stories like this every day.